Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today's case, it's one of those that just grabs you and won't let go. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. The kind that stays with you long after you've heard the details.
Exactly. And the one you brought for us today definitely fits the bill. The disappearance of Dorothy Arnold back in 1910, a wealthy socialite in New York City. I mean, just reading the material you sent, it's clear this mystery gripped the nation back then. And the crazy thing is, it's still unsolved.
It really is a testament to how certain cases capture the public imagination, especially when they involve these stark contrasts. Here you have a young woman, Dorothy Arnold, seemingly living a life of privilege, and then poof, she vanishes without a trace. It's like something out of a novel.
It really is. And it makes you wonder, right, what really happened? Was it foul play? Did she choose to disappear? I mean, we're talking over a century ago, and this case is still considered the oldest missing persons case in the Charlie Project database. That's incredible.
It speaks to the enduring power of the unknown, doesn't it? This idea that even with all our modern tools and technology, some mysteries simply refuse to be solved. It's a bit humbling, actually.
No, I agree. So before we get too deep into the theories, let's set the stage. You've done a ton of research on this. Can you give us a quick rundown of who Dorothy Arnold was and what her life was like before she vanished?
Okay, so picture New York City in the early 1900s, the Gilded Age. We're talking a time of immense wealth, social stratification, and a lot of unspoken rules, especially for women.
Right, the era of Vanderbilts and Astors. I mean, just the names evoke a sense of opulence and, let's be honest, a fair amount of societal pressure.
Exactly. And into this world steps Dorothy Arnold, daughter of Frances Rose Arnold, a successful perfume importer. The family was well off, connected. Her aunt was married to a Supreme Court justice, no less. Dorothy herself was educated at Bryn Mawr, a prestigious women's college. It's a picture of privilege, right?
It definitely paints a picture of a seemingly charmed life. So what was Dorothy like? Was she content with this world of privilege?
Well, that's where things get interesting. Dorothy had aspirations, dreams beyond the typical society girl path. She wanted to be a writer, a serious one. She even submitted stories to McClure's magazine, which was a huge deal at the time.
Wow, so she was aiming high. Was she any good?
Hard to say definitively. We know she faced rejections, which apparently hit her pretty hard. But there's a line in one of her letters where she says, "Mother will always think an accident has happened." It suggests a kind of self-awareness, like she knew how her disappearance would be perceived.
Almost like she was leaving a breadcrumb for her mother.
Possibly, but it also raises the question of how determined she was to control the narrative surrounding her life, even in her absence.
So we have this picture of Dorothy, this young woman striving to break free from societal expectations, facing setbacks with her writing, and then she vanishes. Take us back to that day, December 12, 1910. What do we know about her last known movements?
Okay, so it starts like an ordinary day. Dorothy tells her mother she's going out to buy a dress for an upcoming debutante ball. She leaves their home on the Upper East Side with about $25 in cash, a considerable sum at the time.
And where does she go?
First, she stops at Park and Tilford, a fancy confectionery shop, to buy some chocolates. Then she's seen at Brentano's bookstore on Fifth Avenue, where she purchases a book called Engaged Girl Sketches.
A lighthearted read for a seemingly carefree day. It's almost chilling how mundane these details are, knowing what's to come.
Right. It's this juxtaposition that makes the case so fascinating. Anyway, she runs into a friend, Gladys King, outside the bookstore. They chat briefly, and Dorothy mentions she's planning to walk home through Central Park.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the last confirmed sighting of her.
And this is broad daylight in a busy part of the city, right?
Absolutely. Fifth Avenue, midday, bustling with shoppers and pedestrians. You'd think someone would have noticed something out of the ordinary. But it's like she just stepped into thin air.
So what was the immediate reaction? Did her family contact the police right away?
Here's where we see the power of social pressure come into play. The Arnolds, especially Dorothy's father, were terrified of a public scandal. They were acutely aware of the recent case of Adele Boas, another young woman from a prominent family who had run away, and the unwanted attention it had brought.
So they tried to handle it quietly.
Exactly. Instead of going to the police, they hired a private investigator, John S. Keith, and even brought in the Pinkerton Detective Agency, the big guns of private investigation at the time.
Wow, so a full-on covert operation to find their daughter. What did these investigations uncover?
Keith starts by searching Dorothy's room. He finds all her belongings, except for the clothes she was wearing that day. No sign of a struggle, no packed bags, nothing to indicate she had planned to run away.
Okay, so that rules out a planned disappearance, at least on the surface. Did they find anything else? Letters, diaries, anything that might shed light on her state of mind.
This is where things get even more curious. Keith finds some burned papers in Dorothy's fireplace. They were most likely her rejected manuscripts, which ties back to her writing ambitions and the rejection she'd faced.
Ah, so a possible sign of her growing frustration and despair.
Maybe. But Keith also uncovers something else. Foreign stamped letters and some information about transatlantic passenger liners. It's like a whole other layer of mystery was just peeled back.
So the possibility that she had eloped or even traveled abroad starts to enter the picture.
Exactly. It's a theory that gains traction, especially with the family's initial reluctance to involve the police. It's almost like they were hoping for a scenario where she had simply chosen to start a new life elsewhere, away from the pressures of her current one.
But eventually the police do get involved, right?
Yes. After weeks of silence, the family finally reaches out to the NYPD, and a $1,000 reward is offered for information, a huge sum for the time. It's a clear sign that their private efforts weren't yielding any answers and that the situation was becoming more desperate.
Okay, so we have this disappearance, this frantic but secretive investigation, and the specter of a possible elopement. But something else was going on in Dorothy's life that we need to talk about. This relationship with George Griscom Jr., a man her parents strongly disapproved of. What was the story there?
Right, George Griscom Jr. This is where the societal constraints and the potential for scandal really come into focus. Griscom was older than Dorothy, around 40, and not considered a suitable match by her family. They thought he was a bit of a playboy, not financially stable enough.
Sounds like the classic disapproving parent scenario.
Yeah.
But how serious was this relationship? Did Dorothy seem genuinely invested in him?
Oh, it seems she was quite smitten. She even lied to her parents to spend a week with him in Boston. And get this, she pawned $500 worth of jewelry to finance the trip.
Wow, talk about a bold move.
Yeah.
Pawning family heirlooms to be with this guy. That tells you something about the intensity of her feelings.
Absolutely. And it goes back to that sense of Dorothy trying to break free from the restrictions placed on her. This desire for independence, for a life she could choose for herself, even if it meant defying her family's wishes.
So Griscom, what was his role in all of this? Did he cooperate with the investigation?
His actions after Dorothy's disappearance are, well, perplexing, to say the least. While the Arnolds are scrambling to find their daughter, Griscom takes off on a vacation to Italy with his parents.
Talk about bad timing. Did he offer any explanation for this?
Initially, he claimed to know nothing about Dorothy's whereabouts, but later, when confronted by Dorothy's mother and brother in Italy, he changes his tune a bit. There's even a story about Dorothy's brother getting into a physical altercation with Griscom to retrieve some letters Dorothy had written him.
Whoa, things are getting pretty heated. And what about the letters? Did they reveal anything important?
Unfortunately, no. Both Griscom and the Arnolds claimed they were unimportant, and, get this, they destroyed them.
They destroyed potentially crucial evidence. That's incredibly suspicious. Makes you wonder what they were so desperate to hide.
Exactly. It fuels all sorts of speculation. What did those letters say? Were they love letters, pleas for help, evidence of a secret plan? We'll never know.
Griscom, did he do anything else publicly to try and find Dorothy?
He did something rather odd. He issued a public statement saying he would marry Dorothy if she was found, but only if her mother approved, which, of course, she publicly refused.
So basically a meaningless gesture knowing her mother would never consent. It's also strange. Was there any indication that they were together, perhaps in Italy?
There was a reported sighting of Griscom with a veiled woman in Italy, supposedly Dorothy, but like so many leads in this case, it was never confirmed. Just another tantalizing thread that leads to a dead end.
Okay, so we have the family's theory about the park, we have this possible elopement, and we have this mysterious boyfriend whose actions raise more questions than answers. What other theories were circulating at the time?
Well, the police initially thought Dorothy might simply return on her own. They had experience with missing persons cases where people would reappear after a few days or weeks, sometimes with no explanation. But as time went on, that hope dwindled.
Right, especially with no contact, no demands, no signs of life. What about the family? Did they hold on to any hope of finding her alive?
Her mother did, remarkably so, until her own death. But her father seems to have resigned himself to the idea that she was gone. He even went so far as to state in his will that he believed she was deceased and made no provision for her.
Wow, that's harsh. I mean, imagine being declared dead by your own father while your fate is still unknown.
It speaks to the finality he felt, the acceptance of a tragic outcome. But it also adds another layer of complexity to this whole story.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. A wealthy socialite vanishes,
Mm-hmm.
a secretive investigation, a disapproving family, a mysterious lover, and conflicting theories. But after all this time, after all these years, do we have any closer to knowing what happened to Dorothy Arnold?
Unfortunately, no. Despite all the theories, the speculation, the investigations, both public and private, the case remains a cold case, a mystery frozen in time.
And that's the thing, isn't it? It's not just about solving a crime. It's about understanding a person, a moment in time. What drove Dorothy to make the choices she made? What were her hopes, her fears? These are questions that we may never have definitive answers to, and that's what makes this case so haunting, so compelling.
Absolutely. And the fact that it happened during such a transformative period in American history, the Gilded Age, adds another layer of intrigue. We're talking about a time of rapid social change, growing urban populations, and a clash between traditional values and a burgeoning sense of modernity.
It's like Dorothy Arnold's disappearance becomes this prism through which we can glimpse the anxieties and complexities of an entire era. The pressures on women, the fear of scandal, the allure and danger of a rapidly changing city.
Exactly. And the case also highlights the limitations of privilege. Even with all their wealth and connections, the Arnold family couldn't shield their daughter from whatever fate befell her. They couldn't buy answers, they couldn't silence the whispers, and they couldn't erase the mystery.
So for our listeners out there, if you're fascinated by unsolved mysteries, by the social history of New York City, or simply by the enduring power of a story that refuses to be forgotten, this case is definitely worth exploring further.
And if you want to learn more, you can find a great in-depth article about Dorothy Arnold on the Forgotten Murders blog, which was a fantastic resource for this deep dive.
Yes, the Forgotten Murders blog is a treasure trove of information on cold cases just like this one. We'll be sure to include a link on our website, forgottenmurders.com, so you can check it out.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. What do you think happened to Dorothy Arnold? Was she a victim of circumstance, a woman trapped by societal expectations? Or did she make a deliberate choice to disappear, to forge a new life for herself, even if it meant leaving everything behind?
It's a question that has haunted investigators, historians, and armchair detectives for over a century. And it's a question that perhaps we each have to answer for ourselves. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the mystery of Dorothy Arnold. Until next time, keep exploring the shadows, keep asking questions, and never stop searching for the truth.